The hunt for the doctor who sold fake cancer cures. In 2007, a woman named Kim Tinkham was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Her doctors urged immediate surgery. She refused. Instead, she turned to a man in California who told her surgery wasn't necessary at all. That her cancer, like every other disease, was simply caused by too much acid in her body. He told her the cure wasn't chemotherapy. It wasn't radiation. It was alkaline water, supplements, and intravenous injections of baking soda. Tinkham believed him completely. She went on Oprah Winfrey's television show and told millions of viewers she was cancer-free. 3 years later, she was dead. The man she trusted called himself Dr. Robert O. Young. He wasn't a doctor. He had taken a single biology class at a state university decades earlier and never finished his degree. His doctorate had come from an unaccredited correspondence school, the kind sometimes called a diploma mill earned, according to court records, in less than 8 months. And yet, for decades, terminally ill cancer patients paid him tens of thousands of dollars each, believing he could save their lives. Some of them paid with their life savings. At least 6 of them, according to prosecutors, paid with their lives. This is the story of how one man built an empire out of a fake medical credential and a theory rejected by virtually every serious scientist on Earth, and the decade-long legal fight it took to finally stop him. Chapter 1. The theory. Robert Young's core idea was simple enough to fit on a book cover, which is exactly where it appeared. He called it the pH miracle. His claim was that nearly every disease, cancer included, was caused by the body being too acidic, and that the cure was to alkalinize it through diet, supplements, and specific therapies. It's a theory with no support in mainstream medical science. The human body tightly regulates its blood pH within an extremely narrow range regardless of diet. Wildly shifting it isn't just ineffective, it's dangerous. None of that stopped the idea from spreading. Young published a series of pH miracle books beginning in 2002, expanding into diabetes, weight loss, and general health. They sold well. Some cracked bestseller lists. He built an entire practice around the concept. The pH Miracle Ranch, an avocado and grapefruit property in Valley Center, California, rebranded as a retreat and treatment center. Guests paid between roughly $1,300 and $2,500 a night for the full experience. Lodging, meals, supplements, and, crucially, medical-style treatments delivered on-site. Chapter 2. The treatments. What actually happened at that ranch is where Young's story stopped being just an unusual diet philosophy and became something prosecutors would later call a crime. According to the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, Young and people working for him administered intravenous treatments to patients, despite Young himself holding no medical license of any kind. Prosecutors alleged that at least 6 terminally ill cancer patients received 4 lines of sodium bicarbonate, ordinary baking soda, at $500 per session. Some patients, according to the original criminal complaint, paid at least $50,000 for his treatments. One patient reportedly paid more than $120,000. All 6 of the terminally ill patients named in that original complaint had died by the time the case went to trial. Among them was Kim Tinkham, whose very public journey with Young, including videos and television appearances promoting his methods, had made her one of his most visible success stories. Right up until her death made her one of his most visible warnings. Chapter 3. The first cracks. For years, none of this triggered serious legal consequences. Young operated largely in the open, publishing books, appearing in media, traveling internationally to give lectures and consultations. That began to change in January 2014, when he was arrested and charged with practicing medicine without a license and, more seriously, with fraud and grand theft. The case went to trial in late 2015, stretching across roughly 2 months, with dozens of witnesses and more than 200 pieces of evidence presented to the jury. Young never took the stand in his own defense. Instead, jurors watched recordings, undercover investigators who had gone through his program, and Young's own promotional videos, in which he made his claims directly to camera. His defense argued something narrower than his critics expected. That patients came to him specifically because he wasn't a conventional doctor, that he was upfront about being a naturopathic practitioner, and that the actual needles were handled by licensed medical staff. Chapter 4. The verdict. In February 2016, the jury returned its decision. Young was found guilty on 2 counts of practicing medicine without a license. He was acquitted on a third similar count. On the more serious charges, 6 counts of fraud and grand theft, the jury deadlocked, voting 8-4 in favor of conviction, but unable to reach the unanimous verdict required. One juror later said that, watching the case unfold, jurors had come to see Young as, in their words, a snake oil salesman. Prosecutors announced they intended to retry him on the unresolved fraud charges. Rather than face a second trial, Young ultimately agreed to plead guilty to 2 additional counts of practicing medicine without a license. As part of that plea agreement, he was required to state on the record that he held no degrees from any accredited institution, and that he was not a microbiologist, not a hematologist, not a medical doctor, not a naturopathic doctor, and not a trained scientist of any kind. The man who had spent decades being addressed as Dr. Young was legally required to admit, in open court, that the title had never been true. Chapter 5. The sentence. In June 2017, Young was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months in prison under the terms of his plea agreement. He received credit for time already served and was ordered to wear an ankle monitor. For many who had followed the case for years, it felt like a strangely small consequence for a man accused of taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from dying patients. But Young's legal troubles were far from finished. In 2018, a former patient named Don Cali brought a civil lawsuit against him, alleging that Young had falsely presented himself as a licensed doctor, advised her against surgery and chemotherapy for her breast cancer, and treated her instead with unproven pH injections, allowing her cancer to progress to an incurable stage. A San Diego jury sided with her decisively, awarding $105 million in damages. A judge later reduced that figure to just over $25 million. Still a staggering sum, and a clear signal from the civil courts about how seriously they viewed what had happened. Chapter 6. It didn't stop there. Remarkably, none of this ended Young's career. He continued promoting his methods, remained active on social media, and kept a public presence in alternative health circles for years afterward. In 2020, he drew fresh controversy for comments made at a conspiracy-focused gathering, making unfounded claims connecting vaccines to population control, statements that spread widely online and were repeatedly debunked by independent fact-checkers. Then, in February 2025, Young was back in a courtroom, this time convicted by a jury in North County, San Diego, on a fresh set of charges, including elder abuse and theft from an elderly victim. In June 2025, he was sentenced to additional prison time. More than a decade after his first arrest, and more than 2 decades after Kim Tinkham first appeared on national television praising his methods, Robert Young was still, by the court's own repeated findings, doing fundamentally the same thing. Closing. There's a particular kind of tragedy at the center of this story that has nothing to do with courtrooms or verdicts. It's the fact that Robert Young's patients weren't naive or careless people. Many of them were desperate, facing terminal diagnoses, searching for any option that offered hope where conventional medicine had run out of easy answers. That desperation is exactly what made his false credentials so devastating. A fabricated doctorate, worn confidently enough for years, was sufficient to convince people to abandon treatments that might have saved their lives, in favor of baking soda injections that could not. The legal system eventually caught up with Robert Young, first in a criminal courtroom, then in a civil one, and a decade later again. But it never moved fast enough for the patients named in his very first indictment. Every one of them died before his case ever reached a jury. The title doctor carried Robert Young further, and for longer, than his actual qualifications ever should have allowed. Every story leaves a trace. This has been traced.